So what's the one thing that Jack Welch, the previous CEO of General Electric, said that eats strategy for breakfast? It's culture. And the best ways to drive culture in an organization is to create a set of core values. In business, core values often become wall art and buzzwords. So you do them at the beginning of the year, they're kind of stuck up on the wall, nobody ever talks about them again. And so without living them every day, without making decisions every day through the core values, without hiring through the core values and firing through the core values, they are meaningless. So at Faris Capital Partners, our core values aren't just statements. They're the filtering mechanism that we use to hire, build relationships, and run our properties on a day-to-day basis, and how we serve our investors as well. And today we're going to be pulling back the curtain to share what our core values are, why we chose them, and how they show up in our everyday experience. John, it's great to be here with you.
So good to be here, Mark. I think about Enron, right? At the entrance to Enron, I think it was in Houston or Dallas. I'm trying to remember exactly where they were located, but etched in granite, right when you walked in the building, was trust and integrity, right? And so,
Yeah.
it's I think to me illustrates, right? You can talk about this stuff, but it's actually, do you show up and live it on a daily basis, right? And so, for you and I, we were sitting down and talking through Faris Capital Partners, and
Mm.
it was like literally the second day of the company. We spent a day in a hotel room, conference room, and we just went through everything, right? And the values were interesting because it didn't take us that long to come up with it. And I think the beauty of our values is that you and I had known each other for 5 or 6 years. We had been masterminding. We ran very similar businesses on different sides of the Canadian and U.S. border. And so we had spent a lot of time together getting to know each other, how we operate, how we think about business. And so I say it was easy in a sense because it's actually our values. It's how we approach life, right? And so, it's interesting to think about how many companies can have vastly different cultures, but still find a lot of great success. But I think it really starts with the leaders, right? The leaders of the business have to firmly show up every day living those values, right? Otherwise, you're not going to get anybody else to follow along, right? So at Enron, the people at the top were double dealing. They were cooking the books on the accounting side. They were just, criminals, right? Dishonest people. And so do you think that the lowest level employee was not aware of that, not seeing that? And so it just goes back to, I think, when you're sitting down as maybe you're a new entrepreneur and you're thinking about these core values, ensure that they are in line with who you are and what's important to you. And I think that's the best first step, right? As you kind of think about core values. But Mark, is that kind of how you like to think about it as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting for me always when I'm speaking with, Fair's team, and then John, I know you've, through Mark Spain in the sale, you had hundreds of team members as well. And so one of the things that I like asking our team members, for me, I'm always curious, like, what is it that you really like about working here? And so that's a question that I've asked through the years. And the number one thing that comes up is there's just something different here, Mark.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know, it's the people. It's just something different. It feels different. It feels like I'm part of something. And so what they're explaining is they're explaining culture in their own words. And so core values are the strongest way to create that feeling in team members. And so what are core values? Core values are filtering mechanisms for team members to make consistent decisions. And so if you give them a big rule book with 1,000 pages, do this, don't do this, that book will be maybe read a quarter of the way through and it'll be stuck in a closet and will never be read again.
That's
And
right.
so the power with core values is if you can create, say, like 3 to 7 core values and you speak about them, you break them down, John. For us, we broke it down to fundamentals. And so there are specific things that we do here at Faris Capital Partners that are in line with our set core values, but it gives everybody a consistent set of filtering mechanisms to make consistent decisions. And so we're going to be talking through these core values today, but that's the best way that I'd explain core values is it's a set of rules or behaviors that you operate consistently throughout the company. And as a team or company starts to grow and scale, one of the biggest things that holds a culture strong is setting a set of core values and that are actually they're being lived and they're being breathed on a daily basis. And John, you nailed it. It's got to start at the top because if you have, the owners running around and they're doing everything that's against the core values, everybody sees that. And so a company rots from, I believe a fish rots from the head down. I've heard that analogy. I've heard one person say, no, it doesn't rot from, but we'll just use that context, that
Yeah.
analogy for this one is that a company rots from the head down. And if the head of the company is not consistent in alignment with the values. Now, listen, we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, but overall, if they're living them on a daily basis and if they're talking about them on a daily basis, the rest of the team members will buy into it. And if everybody buys into it, it creates consistency and it creates a feeling within a company that there's just something different here.
Yeah, that's right. And you had mentioned the filtering mechanism, but I've done a lot of the hiring at Faris Capital Partners, and one of the first things I do is share those core values on that initial screening call. And I've had some people kind of chuckle and laugh. Maybe they came from kind of maybe a more cutthroat culture or something, and that genuine love of people they almost think is kind of like, and that's our first value, which we'll get to. But it's just kind of like, okay, good, check mark. This is not somebody for us, right? And when I look
Yeah.
at folks that have not made it with our company for one reason or another, and let me back up and say they're all great people. It's not that they were bad people, but where they missed was related to the core values, right? It was speed of execution, or it was a lack of operational excellence, or maybe they were treating people like a number and not like a fellow human being. And so, when you have that culture built around strong core values that are lived and breathed every day, Mark, what's amazing, especially as your company grows and scales, is that often what happens, it's the team that actually will come to you, or maybe in a sense, and not in a bullying way, but they'll kind of push those people out, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of
Yeah.
like, I don't really want to, collaborate or work with you on this project because I know you're going to be a pain, right? And so that eventually finds its way back to you or I, and we make those decisions or we have those
Well, because
conversations, right?
they stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah,
Like if you have a complainer and they're constantly complaining, and it's like everybody's looking at that person's like, we don't do that here.
yeah,
It's like they they everybody's looking at them and they don't get that same kind of buy-in like maybe they got in their previous company where people are like they're starting to do the same thing. It's they kind of look at them like, no, we don't do that here, and they stick out like a sore thumb. And
yeah,
that's what I love the fact about these values is it attracts the right people and it repels the wrong people in such a beautiful way that I love them. I
yeah,
love values. And so, and this is where turning it into our first core value of a genuine love of people. I believe that love is one of life's ultimate goals. Because if you talk to somebody on their deathbed, in general, they simplify everything. And so if you were to ask them the meaning of life, now I'm a Christian, John. So,
yeah,
for me, it's like, there's I'm going somewhere after this life. And so there's a big purpose. But one of the biggest things that in the Bible it talks about is this idea of love. And so, but anyone on their deathbed, they were just, if you were to ask them in general, they say, love. And it's like,
mm,
the love of my family and the love of, the Lord and the love of, my friends and like love. And
mm,
so love is not this weak, lovey-dovey romantic love. Like a genuine love of people. What I really love about that value is that there's a agape love. It's a deep love of people is what drives you to do excellent work for them, not for yourself. And so love, that's actually our first core value. And it's not the romantic love, it's a genuine love of people. And so that to me, in our previous company, that was such a strong part. And we do this in order, by the way, of what we believe is most important. Because if you have a genuine love of people, you're going to make the right decisions by filtering it through that first and foremost. Now, a genuine love of people can sometimes mean there can be tough love with that. And
yeah,
so sometimes you and I, John, we got to have tough conversations. But ultimately, if we're filtering through that value, if it's, say, we got to let somebody go, that we really believe that there's a better opportunity for them out there somewhere else. And so it's just not the right fit here. And it's actually a genuine love of our people within our team and our investors that person is no longer there as well.
yeah,
So we act in alignment with that value. And that to me is love. That's why I love that both in Fair's team and Fair's Capital Partners as their first core values. of course, core value is the fact that that to me is one of the most powerful things I believe, in this life.
Yeah.
And so that we'll start off with that first core value, John. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, it just yeah, a story actually just came to mind that happened here recently. We had a team member in the early days and, had the talent, the right resume, right behavior, interview was fantastic. But we just weren't getting the results. And so, we gave feedback along the way, right? It wasn't something we just got up frustrated about. We just talked through it. Like, what resources do you need? Do you need to spend some time, with Mark? Like, what can we do to help? And we had a lot of conversations, but it was actually pretty fast. Within 90 days, we had to make a decision. And it's always tough, tougher for the person that's we're releasing, to be very clear. But it's tough on the company. Turnover can cause a disruption, and I'm a human being, and it's just not an easy conversation to have. But you have to do it. Well, my point of sharing all that was about 9 months later, I get a phone call from this individual, and I was kind of like, "I wonder why he's calling. That's kind of odd. Like, I haven't talked to him in 9 months, and, we candidly fired the person." And what was interesting is he said, "John, I wanted to actually reach out. That experience there actually taught me a lot. The time I spent there with Mark, I learned a lot about his approach to relationships and sales. But, just I wanted to share with you, I had something personally going on that was impacting my performance. He shared with me that it was hard for him to get out of bed and get motivated. He had been previously like an independent contractor. We have an 8:30 a.m. huddle, so he was struggling with just the consistency. And all that to say that his experience with us and how things worked out led him to a solution to his personal challenges. He, cleared up those issues, kind of got serious about it, fixed it. And then it led to another wonderful opportunity for him, and he's in a much better place. And then he calls me a couple weeks later and was like, I actually know some people that may be interested in investing, right? So, you know, it's in that genuine love of people that led to that result because it wasn't the right fit. There were things happening. Him and I both knew it. I'm not going to sit there and say I want to hear all your personal problems, right? But I could just detect something was happening,
Mm,
and so we approached it in the right way. And it's not always how it plays out, but I was actually really proud that day when he called, just because it was such great feedback. You had made him a better person. The relationship with me had made him a better person. It just wasn't the right fit, but he's now in a much better place and finding a lot of success. And so I think that's a great example of really that value in action because it's about respect, right? It's about
yeah.
a certain amount of empathy, right? One thing I've learned is that everybody's going through something, I mean, nobody has a perfect life. And if one of the biggest issues I have with social media is just the fakeness of the whole thing, right? I mean, I've literally had friends that I'm with and are having a meltdown on a vacation, and then I go on Facebook like 30 minutes later, and they're talking about what a wonderful day it was. I'm like, dude, you just had an anxiety attack and like embarrassed yourself. I mean, that's a real example. And so that fakeness that sometimes happens in social media, for me, it's also about just authenticity and just not being afraid to have those great conversations when something goes really well and not being afraid to have those tough conversations when something could be better. So it's really, I guess, to sum it up, it's like a people first approach to business. Servant leadership would maybe be another way to say it. But it's imperative that everybody lives that, right? So if a team member is falling short, we have to let them know and in some cases make a tough decision. But it also extends to our residents, right? And our investors. And when an investor comes with us with some feedback, we're humans and sometimes we're like, well, no, we actually did the right thing here. There was actually a recent example. I just caught the tail end of it. It was at the end of a meeting, and you were talking with one of the team members, and the person arguably may have been rude in their approach and wasn't really handling it the right way. But what did you say? You said, you know what? Let's just own it. Let's just take extreme ownership. They obviously felt a certain way. Let's do something nice in return
Mm,
and, rebuild the relationship, right? So it's not always about who's right or who's wrong. It's just like, what can we do to make this situation better and make this person feel better? Because at the end of the day, that person was probably going through something that had
yeah.
nothing to do with us, and it kind of blew up in our face a little bit. But that's okay. We're big boys and girls. We can handle it, and so we just own it, right? So yeah, that people first approach, right? Another thing I thought about too, Mark, here is one of our deals that we're co-GP on had some delays in the construction. You picked up the phone and called every single investor. You didn't just send out an email, right? So it's just that people first, whatever it takes to fix this situation, we're going to do. So that's what it's about for me.
Trust is such a big thing, and I think for me, whenever you're investing with somebody, it's always in the back of your head: are they telling me the full truth?
Yeah.
Are they? Is there something else going on there? And so for me, it's like when we're having our discussions, it's like, are we being straight here?
Mhm.
And I think it's massive
Yeah.
to be able to build trust. And so when we're communicating, it's like
Yeah.
speak straight. And so I respect that. And that's where it goes back to, I mean, the communication as well as like simplification in the approach. It's like our investors, not, super successful entrepreneurs, right? That's who we're primarily we have doctors and dentists and entrepreneurs are really big, and we have other real estate investors as well that come into our deals, and so all super successful, but they're not doing this full time, and you can't expect them to know all the jargon and this and that. And so that's one of our jobs, is to be able to simplify it and to be straight. So that's genuine love of people. Next one is wise choices, making wise choices. So this is a big one. When you're buying tens of millions of dollars in real estate at a time, every decision matters in a big way. And
Mm.
so if we don't get a deal right, it could be 5-year hold period of just horrible nightmare. And so this is where for us making wise choices, that was very, we'll say it was very uh, intentional in our approach. That it was our second core value after genuine love of people.
Mhm.
And so this is where it's like the discipline on hiring the right people, and then the discipline on when we have the right deal on filtering it through the right mechanisms to make sure that we do not get in something that isn't wise. And so
Yes.
this means for us reaching out to, if we have a mastermind where our leadership team, the five of us, John, we jump on a call, we rip apart a deal, and we still have lingering questions. We have uh, um, a council outside of our group that we can make phone calls to and get wise counsel from them as
Mm.
well. We have access to books and online, and we have counsel from legal and accounting that are the best in the business. And for us, it's just a quick phone call or text, and we can get information very quick. So making wise choices is a very significant core value that we filter our decisions through. We filter who we bring on as an investor as well, John. Some cases it's just not the right fit. It's got to be a mutual fit both ways. We have to be very intentional on the ones we're going to go after, and we need to be very wise that we make sure that we don't miss anything so that we get the big wins down the road.
That's right. And that looks like discipline around our buy box. For us, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, value add. And then we apply the three golden rules. First being has to cash flow on day one. Second being fixed rate financing only. And then third is always having a strong reserve and contingency for our CapEx, our capital expenditures, our renovation budget. And so, every once in a while, Mark, something comes along and it's 78 or and you're like, oh, maybe. And we get a little down the path, but usually one of us sort of speaks up and says, nope, it violates our rules. Right. And so it's beyond just a, piece of wall art. It's actually something that we have systems built around. Right. And then that flows into the next value, which is first class service. Right. And, our communication guarantee. But it applies to everything we do. Right. It's in how we reach out to investors by phone at certain key moments in the process. It's how we respond to feedback that we receive. It's sending out gifts, after closing, just all those little things along the way that make a big difference. And then at the resident level, it's ensuring our leasing centers are always clean and tight. We have the guarantees that we offer our residents. So all these things add up to include that first class service. And, that in a sense is a little bit aspirational as well. It goes back to our mission, which is to create, go full out for our investors and provide the best investing experience in the world. So it's an area we're always looking to improve. And where can we layer in some additional service that will just make this a truly first class experience?
Yeah, and it's what our investors expect. I know for me investing in a deal, it's like I like first class service and I'll pay extra for it. Now the cool thing is that these deals are not only are they super strong, but if you can get first class service while you're investing in a very strong deal, then that to me is like a no-brainer. And so that's where John coming into this was, we can't just be a little bit better. There's I don't know, maybe there's a million different things you can invest in.
Yeah.
Millions of things you can
Millions,
invest in,
millions. Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And so that's where it can't just be a little bit better, it needs to be a lot better. So that's where the asset class, I needed to believe in it, but then I needed to believe that the service that we deliver can be a competitive advantage as well if we do a really good job at it.
That's
And
right.
so that's where we said, okay, number 3 core value is first class service. And it just ties in so well with our mission statement as well
That's
that you
it.
had mentioned there. We got the next one's operational excellence here, John. You want to talk about that one, that we just don't wing things here?
Yeah, yeah. It's something that, sometimes in business you have to learn the hard way. So at my prior business, I will say, when I first joined, I was an agent and there was a manual, to be very clear. But in terms of different things like how to submit documents and, get work with the administrative team, it was a little ad hoc. But very quickly, as we grew, we realized we needed good systems in place. And I was kind of tasked with that. It was actually my first management role, and it was to build out a whole program for our buyer business because we really didn't have a manual. We had one buyer agent. We wanted to grow and scale that business. And so thankfully, very early in my career, I learned the value of, simple checklists. Because I will tell you, Mark, the first pass was like 150 pages. And I spent a lot of time, effort on it. I was very proud of it. And Mark Spain was very kind, but he said, man, this is just like a lot, we need to trim this down. Let's get it down to the important stuff. So simple checklists that are repeatable, duplicatable processes and systems. So across our organization, even before we found a deal, even before we hired an analyst to help us find a deal, we had created systems. And on a regular cadence, we go back and look at those systems and just ensure they're up to date because sometimes you get feedback, you make a change, but it just fails to get documented, right? So on a regular cadence, we're going back and we're looking at excellence is not perfection. It's about consistency and accountability. So, ensuring that, if we have a problem, we attack that problem quickly. We fight fires the second they pop up. If we make a mistake, we own that mistake. And then we have an after action review for anything we do, as simple as like a webinar. If we do a webinar, we hang out for 15 minutes afterward. What could be better? What did we do that was good? What should we do more of? What should we do less of? Close a deal, same process. If anything comes up. And so that concept of after action review, it really comes from the military, but it's something we've applied here at Faris Capital Partners. And then it comes into the meeting cadences, right? So the morning huddle every day at 8:30 a.m. is a critical component there. If you own a business or are operating a business and have not implemented a morning huddle, I'm telling you, it's the simplest, easiest thing you can do, and you'll see immediate results from it. It'll be clunky for the first 30 or 60 days. That's okay. Just stick with it, build that habit, get it ingrained, and you will see the results. Then we have what we call the level 10, which is a weekly meeting where we're reviewing quarterly priorities and then company wide metrics. And everybody's reporting not only on their metric, but their goal and their relationship to that goal. Did they hit it? If not, what are they going to do about it? If they did, should we do more? When you find those little gold nuggets, sometimes it's like at a metric, you might think it's the right metric, but then after 30, 60 days, it's not moving the needle, so you might change it. But sometimes you find one that's just a killer, and you're like, oh gosh, if it's 5 calls a day is getting this result, what would 10 calls a day do? So having those weekly meetings and those daily morning huddles, as well as the same page. And then on the property level, it's viewing the properties regularly. So myself or Mark is in each of our properties typically every 2 months in some
Yeah.
combination. Sometimes we're all there together. Sometimes it's just one of us. And we have a checklist that we work through on every property visit. So Mark, I mean, you and I, when we visit these assets, we walk every single hallway. We go up and down every flight of step, go through every breezeway. We walk around each building. And, sometimes all I find is a dryer vent that's a little filled with lint, and I'll take a picture and send it to the maintenance guy. Occasionally you find nothing. Sometimes you find problems, and candidly, we were in Charleston one time and collected about a bag's worth of trash, like a 50-gallon trash bag, and filled it about halfway full of cigarette butts and candy wrappers. And about 30 days later, we made a change with our property management team because we just realized they weren't living our values there. So
Mhm.
it's not only about, doing things well, but it's having the systems that create that predictability and that duplicatable experience.
Yeah. And having people that buy into those values as well. When you get the right people,
Mm.
they grab onto those values, they make them their own, and then they champion those values along the way. And that's where you start to see magic happen. That's where you start to see consistency of the overall community within the organization grow.
Yes.
And that's where they start to, we'll say, champion and protect when people aren't in alignment with them as well.
That's right. And then the fifth one, Mark, speed of execution. Now, the key here is you said this earlier, but we filter these decisions through those values in order. So we never sacrifice operational excellence or service for speed. So it's about moving quickly, but not being reckless, right? So To me, it's like the old thing with procrastination, right? Don't wait for tomorrow for what can be done today. So if something falls into your lap, just deal with it. Just get it off your plate. Now, we do encourage our team members to time block and to structure their days so, they're efficient and get all the important items done. In fact, in the huddle, they're reporting on the number one priority for each day. So that always takes precedent. But if, there's a little something that comes across from an investor or a resident and we could just handle that right now, like get it done. Why just get it off your plate? Why wait till tomorrow, right? And so, where it also shows up is in our 28-day transformation. So, Mark, I'm sort of been intrigued by the response to the 28-day transformation because I would have thought this would have been somewhat normal. In other words, when you close on an asset, make an immediate impact, do the exterior renovations, update the amenities, show some value. But I'm learning it's not super common. And so that's just another great example of how we leverage that speed to build momentum, and that momentum ultimately builds trust because through momentum you get results, right? And so it's our fifth value. It's definitely an important one, but once again, we're cautious not to move so quickly that we sacrifice that genuine love of people, or we don't make a good choice because we move too fast. So having mechanisms in place that you're moving quickly, but you know when to slow down when it's something super critical or important.
Yeah, that's so well said, John. And so it also helps with our residents when we look after deficiencies quickly. They love that fifth core value. And so these core values are up in all of our communities as well. And it's something that we champion here at Faris Capital on a daily basis. So if you are interested in learning more, go to fulloutinvesting.com. We have a sample deal and we have our 10-step full out investing process as well to learn a little bit more about how we do our deals. So
Sure.
thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share it with other high net worth investors that you think will benefit from it. We love and believe in you guys. Keep dreaming and investing big.